So welcome to Writers of the World. Today we're discussing life after publication. The path to publishing a book requires a lot of tenacity and resilience. Today's talented author panel is going to discuss their experiences and perspectives. If you could each please introduce yourselves.
Hi, I'm Gayle Woodson. I'm a surgeon who does volunteer work around the world. My novel, After Kilimanjaro, was inspired by the work I've been doing in Africa, in Tanzania.
Hi, I'm Anna Penenberg. I'm an author and a mother. I'm also a healer, and I work with individuals affected by trauma. My memoir, Dancing in the Narrows, is a period of my life where my daughter was ill, and it's a mother-daughter odyssey through illness and self-discovery. I live in Topanga, California.
Hi, I'm Susan Ritz. I live in Montpelier, Vermont, and my book is A Dream to Die For, which is a small town mystery with some cult elements. It's darkly humorous, and it also has lots of magical realism in it. And I'm also a journalist and an educator.
Hi, I'm Margaret Schuette, and I live in New York City, and I've spent most of my life in dance. I edited my late mother, Carola Schuette's memoir, Journey Between Two Worlds. It's about her upbringing in Germany during the Depression and World War II, finding love during the occupation, and then coming to America.
Hi, I'm Danielle Koehler. I'm a designer, illustrator, and soon-to-be author, originally from Virginia, but I currently live in southern Chile, which was the inspiration for my debut novel, The Other Forest, which is coming out in September.
Hi, I'm Stacey Agdern. I am coming to you tonight from a town known for its literary history in New York. I have been a bookseller, a viewer, and I am an author. I am now an author. My debut novel, Miracles and Menorahs, came out from Thule Publishing in October, and my second book, The History of Us with Thule, comes out at the end of this month. I'm really, really happy to be here.
Welcome, everyone. So can you tell us when your book was published and what some of your challenges have been since then? If you're not yet published, feel free to discuss some of your pre-publication challenges.
Well, hi, my book was published in October 2018, and I've learned a lot through this process. One of the things I really learned was how important proofreading is. I've published hundreds of scientific articles before, and the journalists, beat you over the head until you correct every punctuation and get the references right. And although my novel had been proofread and I looked through it, there still were a lot of typos, and it was, I think it really affected the way that the book came out. And so I've learned proofreading is the most. And I've also learned, I was told, you have to market your book, and I thought, yeah. And I've learned since then how important it is to market your book yourself, even if you've got a PR person. They don't always deliver what they say they're going to deliver.
Well, my book, A Dream to Die For, came out in July 2019 from She Writes Press. And one of the things I've learned is how important support from other authors is. And I think She Writes Press does a really good job of connecting all the authors. And I also learned what an exciting world indie publishing has become and how many different voices there are out there. And I love connecting with people and stories that I would never have found in the traditional publishing world.
Well, one of the first things before publishing even came into the picture was the time to finish editing. That was my biggest concern. It's taken me 8 years, and actually, this is my maiden voyage with publishing. So there's a lot that was a challenge, and researching publishers, defining my role as editor, once finding a publisher, because since I was not the author, I had a difficult time trying to really establish my place, and also feeling intimidated by the author realm and the requirements in that role. Of course, all the technological aspects have been very daunting, and they continue to be. Entering social media and for the first time has been a real challenge and continues to be. But I'm learning also about marketing and promotion, and I know it's an ongoing thing. And as Gayle said, I also realized that it's something that you have to do mostly yourself. Other people are not going to have necessarily the same interests that you do. And so you really need to keep plugging away. And I just had never, I only thought about the manuscript initially and getting my mother's words in the right way that still came across as her voice, not me messing with it. And so all the other parts I continue to learn about. So it's a wonderful challenge. It really is.
I published my book with She Writes Press in July 2020. In the beginning stages of the pandemic, I was one of the first group of us that wasn't going to be live speaking at a bookstore. And so I ran into immediate challenges, even though I knew very little. It's my first book, and it was a labor of healing for me to write it and to put this story out and hopefully to help others. And so I was very proud of having done that, and that She Writes Press liked my book. And I suddenly had these other authors that were available to be supportive, but I had really no clue what this journey was going to be like to have your book published and really be at the helm of that, because I didn't know any of the pieces. So I just kind of feel like my place in this panel is that I had no presence online, no website, nothing, and look at me today. Big learning curve.
Brava, brava.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, well, speaking of websites, since my book isn't published yet, I don't know how it will be, but I'm used to working with authors on their websites and sometimes their book covers and other, design needs, because my father has an independent publishing company, and so I've worked with a lot of his authors and always kind of been behind the scenes. So as of now, my biggest, I don't know if the correct word is frustration, but what's holding me back the most is this kind of imposter syndrome that I'm not supposed to be here. I'm not an author. I'm a designer. But, my dad has published a lot of books. I've seen all of the authors and all of their passion and how they've done. And I think it's really motivated me to be able to do this. So, and hearing all of you, and I'm right there with you. Even though it's what I do for a living, it's different when it's you having to do it for yourself and market yourself and sell yourself. And it's now I'm seeing how it is. So it'll be interesting, and I'm really excited to hear the rest of what you have to say. Do you have any advice for me going forward?
Anna, you were talking about being part of the first group of authors who were publishing in the pandemic. Miracles and Menorahs, which is this guy, you can kind of maybe see it, my lovely background, came out in October of 2020. So in the second group of books that came out during the pandemic. One of the things that I absolutely learned, and maybe it's because I was a bookseller first, maybe it's because I was dealing with a similar degree of imposter syndrome. But one of the things that I was doing as I was dealing with editing, I was dealing with making my deadlines, I was dealing with the process of proofreading and sort of dealing with all of these things, is that I was paying attention to what everybody else was doing. Because as everybody else was dealing with the shift that the pandemic sort of did to how we release books, how we market books. By the time October came around, I was ready. I was excited. I was ready. I was nervous, because I think we all are, especially when we get to that point of saying, oh my gosh, I actually did this. I'd been striving towards this point for however long, and this time has come. So by October of 2020, all of the things I'd listened to, all of the things I'd learned, I said, let's have fun with this. My launch party was held at a bookstore in Chicago, like with a musician from Texas. Like, I took full advantage of it in ways that I don't think I would have been able to do if, you know, if everything was happening in person. I was on as many podcasts, as many shows, if you will, as I possibly could be, because again, like these were opportunities that would not have been open to me beforehand, but because of the situation that I was releasing this book into, I jumped at every single one of them. And it's sort of helped me prepare and plan and organize for the book that comes out at the end of the month for History of Us. So I had that one book behind me, and now I'm preparing for the second one. So, yeah.
So this is a recurring theme, the imposter syndrome. Could you each, or a few of you, describe what this phantom image is of what an author is supposed to be that's so intimidating? And do you have a preconceived notion of what an author is?
So for me, I think one of the things that it's not necessarily the preconceived notion of role so far as it is, as long as you've spent time in publishing on a particular side. For me as a bookseller and a reviewer, I sort of had this idea of what my role in publishing would be. And switching over to being an author took a lot because of that mental shift that was required of me. It was, oh, you mean I'm the one who's getting my book reviewed, as opposed to me sitting there and reviewing other people's books. I'm the one who has to sort of be there on the other side of the bookseller and talk to them about where my book would go on the shelf. I'm the one who's doing all of these things. My publisher is amazing, but I mean, that's at least what it was for me.
So it's a part sort of a judgment, you feel maybe a sense of judgment coming potentially from other people or the world?
If I can jump in here, for me, just the word author was very intimidating because it suggested that the individual has published, has been at it for a while, and really knows how to write well. And I thought, I'm none of those things. And, you know, I come from the dance world, and I had never done anything like this except edit my own, you know, term papers and, you know, things like that. And so this was a whole new venture. In fact, when I was taken on by a publisher and they kept referring to me as author, I'm going, no, I'm not the author, I'm the editor. I kept having to correct them all the time. And then after a while, I'm going, well, they're not changing their terminology here. So maybe I have to kind of slide into it somehow. And so it's an interesting question of identity. You know, you tend to think that, you know, because someone has a certain title, that there are all these other attributes that go with it, and loads of experience. But then again, I started to learn in looking at different websites that people's backgrounds were very different. They didn't all start as authors. They were, you know, scientists, or they were, you know, a hiker, or God knows what. I mean, everything you can imagine, or someone in cooking and cuisine arts. And I thought, oh, okay, you just have to have experience in life, and then you're equipped at a certain point based on your experience to write about it, you know, and at least get started with that. So very slowly, it started to loosen me up a little bit. So, still intimidating, but still, you know, okay.
I think part of that could be because of the, you know, in the old publishing model, people had to be accepted by a publishing house. Whereas now you're kind of stepping out and saying, I hereby declare I'm an author. Like nobody has that right to frame you in that way anymore. So it's a different world.
Yeah, that's for sure. I mean, the thought that my work is as valuable as the publishing house work is really, I try to have to tell myself that, but it's still, being an indie publisher, I think maybe adds to the imposter syndrome. Like you said, somebody's not picked you and said, okay, I like this. I went out myself and said, I'm going to do this. And what gives me the right to do that? I don't know. Am I that am I good enough? And then to get there, just wondering if somebody made a mistake. It could only have been me, so.
I felt intimidated because I had to submit my work and then it was accepted, and it had different levels to it. And mine was accepted at the stage 1, you're completely finished. It's ready to go. And that means that I did spend, before I got to She Writes Press, many years working on it, and all the way to all of the polished editing. But then I was in this sea of women, some of whom had already 3 books behind them, and were like career writers and fiction writers, and it was so intimidating to me because I felt like I wrote. The main character in my book is me, obviously, because it's memoir, and so it's me that we're talking about, and it's my book, and I didn't just tell a story, I wrote it as a literary piece. So that was my confusion with myself, having sort of a new career of sorts with the new title, and where was I going to fall, and how well had I done my literary writing, and my, the way in which I crafted my story that was real, and my character that is me, and jumping out of the process of having done that, which for me was kind of a deep exploration in healing from that period of my life, and what that was all about, and kind of exemplifying that in that story. And then popping out as the author of this thing, which is right here with the butterfly, like that whole metamorphosis process. And when I got to the butterfly, I really didn't know how that worked. And so I feel like it challenges you with your identity of how you fit in, and then that world was changing so much when I got into it that it was really like flying by the seat of my pants.
I had kind of a different experience of being just totally naive about publishing and literary works or fiction or anything. And I had come from a first career of being a doctor, publishing medical books, lots and lots of articles. And I had this story that I wanted to write that just kind of came out. And I was kind of like, okay, world, here I come with this story. And it's like realizing, oh, there's billions of books out here. And to me, it was sort of like realizing, okay, I'm just one of the little flowers in the field. Yes, maybe it's a very good book, but there are just a whole bunch of really good books. So for me, it was a kind of a different thing. Like I said, because I was just naive about it.
It's interesting for me to hear all of you who've already been published either once or twice, or and I've actually heard this from other authors as well that are even traditionally published with 3 books or so on. So I'm starting to think that maybe this feeling never goes away, and maybe it's like what Stacey said, that you just kind of have to put yourself out there and believe that you could do it and make yourself into this author, whether or not you really believe it. So I like that idea. I'm going with that, Stacey.
Fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
What do you wish you had known beforehand, and what would have made your journey easier?
Well, I'm following up on what Anna said about I had no website, no social media presence, nothing, and no technological ability whatsoever. So I realized that selling books online is really the way to go, but I had no idea how to do that. So I hired people and I learned and I worked really hard at it, and I posted a lot of things and I got followers, but it was a long slog and a long climb. And I wish I'd known that ahead of time, so it would have been more fun. And I could have probably sold more books if I'd already been a presence, if it had the platform that people talk about out there already. But on the other hand, it just means I'm set up for my next book seems like it will be all ready to go, and I won't have to get over that hurdle this time.
So Susan, you're talking about knowing the scope ahead of time would have helped.
Yeah, it would. I mean, I just wish I'd known. I still have trouble like figuring out like, how do I put my blog on my website? I don't know. I have to call my late person. But if I'd felt confident in all that enough, and I'd known the world of like, especially Instagram, I'd never been on Instagram before. And I was so surprised to find out that's where all the smart readers go, especially women, and all these young women who read, the power readers. And I had no idea that's where they were hiding all these time. They weren't hiding. I just hadn't discovered them. And if I'd known that ahead of time, well, I would have learned a lot from them, just about a lot of books that I would love to read. But also I would have learned how to reach them and how to have them review my book and put my name out there. And so I didn't realize that that's how it all worked. I had no idea, but I was very lucky. And I had some friends who helped me, and I got on a blog tour right away in the very beginning, and I expanded from there. So I had a lot of help from a lot of people that had much more knowledge and understanding of the social media world than I did.
Could you tell us the name of the blog tour, Susan?
Susie's. Oh, no.
Susie's a pre-approved.
Yeah, Susie's approved. I'm like, gosh, it's been 2
Approved.
years. Okay. Susie's approved book tour. Yes. And it was great.
I'm having mine right now.
Oh, good. Well, I'll have
Yeah.
to look. Yeah, your cover's very familiar. It's been out there.
That says something.
That's a good sign. She's heard about it all the
I
way in
mean,
Vermont.
Right.
I have to say that actually, I think it was best not knowing ahead of time all that was involved, because I'm sure that I would have pivoted on my heels, done an about face, and just hightailed it out of there. Nope. I made a promise to my mother when she passed 8 years ago that she was indeed going to see her book somehow between two hardcovers or two covers, real covers. And so that was the impetus that kept me going, that I had to forge ahead, because you can't let your mama down when you've made a promise to her. And so that definitely kept me going. And I have to say, though, that once I was into it and learned what was involved, I think for me, because I need like an overview, and I need also a time priority as to what needs to be done and when. And if I had a better grip on that, it's not that nobody told me, they certainly did. It's just that if I had a better grip on that and handle on, so I knew how to plan as to what comes next and how much time do I need for this, that may have helped, but then again, maybe not. But I have to say what's really been very helpful all along is that the fabulous team at the publishers has been extraordinarily helpful, readily available, and always patient, and puts up with my total ignorance in the technological field. So blessings on them all, on everybody. So I'm still at it, so.
Yeah, one of the things I learned that I was not prepared, really prepared to give an elevator speech about what's your book about, because I thought it was obvious what my book was about. But in coming up what to put on the back cover, what to put in a blurb, what to put in advertisements, and just really getting down to the nitty-gritty of who's the character, what happens, how do you draw people into the book, and because I would get bogged down in the whole plot. And I've been taking some online courses about that and looking at it, and I think my next book I'm going to be better prepared to do queries and to put things out, because I just, like I said, I didn't think so much about the marketing. I thought, well, here's this book, hello world, here's my book. So that's what I've learned, and I'm also going to spend more time getting a professional editor to do a level up of not just the proofreading, but making sure the things in the plot are as clear as they might be. I had little things that people picked up on in the book. Some person thought that one of the birds I described was not in Africa, and that person has written negative reviews about it on 3 different websites.
About a bird. Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah, but anyway, yeah, I've learned that it's not just writing the book. You have to be really solid in your mind about how you're going to pitch this to people and what to say when you get a chance like this to talk.
Gayle, did She Writes Press not catch those issues with their editing?
Well, they certainly wouldn't have researched African birds.
Yeah, good point.
But I'm not sure. I'm not sure because it went through a proofreading process, and I think I had an awful lot of typos, and they picked them up, and then there were more typos, and then there were some issues when it went to the press, and I just wasn't. I'm not very good at picking up typos because I tend to read by scanning, and I think we all have a tendency that if there's a word, if you know what the word is supposed to be, you don't notice that there's an R in it instead of an N.
Yeah, your brain skips over it. It sees the correct word when it's not there. Yeah.
Right. So that's something I have to do is get somebody else to look at that.
Mm-hmm. I hired an extra proofreader.
Good idea.
Beyond She Writes too.
Can I ask everybody a question about what Gayle was saying? This is something that I've seen different answers for. To read reviews or not to read reviews? Do you all read your reviews?
Yeah, you can't help it.
Have any?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There yet?
I've seen some people say it drives them crazy, so I don't know.
Back and forth.
Well, I was lucky. I only got one really bad one, but that one was really bad.
Oh no.
But I figured out, almost all the other ones were written by women, and that one was written by a guy. And my book is pretty strong female character, feminist leaning book. And that's why would they give him that book to review? But I was really upset for about a half a day.
I think it's a question of the weight you give to them. For example, Trevor Noah's recipe for success is, he says, don't give too much attention to the negative. Focus on the 15 people who do like you, not the one who doesn't, because otherwise you're giving a disproportionate amount of power to the one person. Focus on your fans and just because he says basically you're creating a product and it's not for everybody. And it's normal that some people won't like it, and you really shouldn't worry about that.
I think it's important not to be upset by the reviews, but there are some things that you could learn. You may read something and say, well, they just don't like the way I write. But if they pick up on something that you learn from, it can help you going forward. I came from the background of writing grant reviews for research, and you work for a year to get your program project grant into NIH, and it comes back with 3 different reviewers, and 2 of them think it's great and 1 thinks it's the worst thing they've ever heard. And so you just look and see what can I learn from the negative reviews, but not feel dragged down by it.
I would agree with Gayle, even though I'm not there yet. I may change my mind when I get there, but I do feel that you can learn from other people's comments, and that if you don't agree with what they've said, try to sort of see it from their perspective. What were they seeing, or what were they not seeing? And was it something that I did? What would I need to do? And then you just kind of make some kind of an assessment. It's kind of like a professor giving you a grade or a comment on a paper you've written. And maybe you'll say in the beginning, well, why did they do that? I just don't understand. But then if you spend more time with it, then you might have a better understanding. But then, of course, there are those you just want to dismiss.
One of the things that I brought into this was my time reviewing. I actually reviewed for a couple of different places during the earlier part of my involvement in the greater Romancelandia, as it were. And one of the things I learned while doing all of that is that, yes, reviews are fundamentally subjective in certain places. Like, they just randomly assign people. Sometimes they assign people randomly to things, and you never know if the person's going to get your story or not. And that's not up to you, right? That's not up to you as an author. That's nothing you can control. And so, yes, if you're going to read reviews, be very, very honest and clear with yourself that all you're going to do is try to figure out like what you can take from them and what not. If you don't think you can do that, avoid them, because one of my favorite sort of series of conversations that happened over the last however many years is the idea that reviews are for readers, not for authors. And any bad review that hits at a particular, I don't like this idea of something, might find a reader who loves that. And it's, you know, and so they can be so, they are so completely subjective, but they have their purpose and they're really interesting to go through. And the people, and the thing is, like, it's also, the other thing I think about a lot when I was reviewing is that it's pretty much when you're doing it, especially when you're blogging or bookstagramming or doing YouTube or, you know, putting together a YouTube channel, it's a thankless job. You're doing it because you love it. You're doing it because you want to have an interaction with the things that you love the most. And that can be, you know, and it's a beautiful thing to watch someone with that degree of passion, like put these channels and these, you know, these images together. So I guess the way that I see it in a nutshell is that reviews are for readers, not really for authors. And that the best thing you can do is have as little interaction with the reviews itself as you possibly can.
I agree with Stacey because I've worked with a lot of first-time authors who get their confidence just devastated by reviews, and it doesn't go away. It's like really to the point that some have told me they never want to write again, or, you know, it's just completely demolished them. So there is definitely, you know, that perspective. If you can't take the knocks, then maybe get somebody else to read it for you and kind of screen out the ones that are maybe watered down, the ones that are a bit too critical and so on, because some people are professional reviewers on Amazon and they go to town. I mean, unless you've published a book yourself, you can't eviscerate somebody else's attempt. And I think they go too far sometimes, and they haven't even taken the courage themselves to publish anything.
You're reminding me, actually, when I was being reviewed, when I was having my choreography performed many moons ago. And of course that was reviewed. And the interesting thing to me is that most of the reviewers at the time who were reviewing dance were not from the dance field. They were from the music field or some other field entirely, and they just were assigned to do that. But if I got a bad review, I certainly didn't stop dancing. I mean, I was not planning on stopping dancing or choreographing. So that was going to continue. So the same thing with writers, don't let that stop you. And the thing is, when you do get good reviews, it's great to glean out for your press kit and send it out where it needs to be sent, where people will appreciate it. So I'm used to it from that realm. So. And
it's very interesting. You can bring the tenacity and resilience you have from the dance world to this whole journey you're going through now, because that's a lovely perspective you have.
Thank you. There are many similarities, and you know, it's like just transferring one set of skills to another medium. And I've been learning that as well. It's really fascinating. I think other people are doing the same. And so that's another step in the learning process, that you learn about yourself and what's possible. So I certainly appreciate these new ventures and experiences.
I feel empowered just listening to that.
I want to bring in something, experience that I had because of writing a memoir. And that was that, you know, in my mind, I was writing my story and publishing my story, and that was that. But what happens when you're in the publishing process and before your pub date is that you have to figure out what are the themes in your book, who's your audience, what did you, and it's like, it was a different part of my brain, and it just really shocked me. I guess I knew nothing, which was true, about publishing. I assumed somebody would know what was fascinating about my book and put that on as, you know, the marketing tools, but I was being asked to do that, and I was by no means objective about my story or my character. And I had to go to a different part of my brain and try to think, who is my audience? And why would they read this book? And what is it about the character? It was a really wild experience. And I've read my book a number of times, and then I've had large periods of time in between. And now I feel like I'm so relaxed about it. I just want to read it like somebody else wrote it, and see what else is in there that I want to talk about on podcasts. And, you know, because now I've done a number of podcasts alone and with my daughter, because she's the other main character, and her journey with Lyme disease. And so I think that is what I would say that I had no clue about beforehand, and that I would have to figure out who the readers were. I remember when I was writing my book, and I went to Dina Metzger to kind of get some feedback, and she was talking about the readers, and I was like, who are the readers? I mean, I was like, I was so not an author yet that I had no understanding of how the experience for the reader was going to be. And that's not how you write, but it's a factor. So that's what I have to say about marketing. You really need to put that hat on when you get to that place in the process.
I think that's why, Danielle, you were mentioning it's difficult to do it for yourself. I think it's the same thing as you have to go outside of yourself and look at this as a client, as a project, and it's very difficult to do.
It's interesting hearing what Anna says from the nonfiction point of view, because you basically were your own main character. And so the story was just so close to you that, from me coming from a fiction side of it, it was hard to write the synopsis because I felt close to my main character, and I felt like it was such an emotional journey that I kept trying to write about the interior journey that she took instead of the outward journey. So I can't imagine for you having to write a synopsis and a book blurb and all of this for your own life when it's something that's just so close to you that you really can't zoom out and, like you're saying, try to read it from the perspective of somebody who's never experienced what you actually went through. That I can't imagine trying to do that.
And there was a lot of anxiety with it. Like, what if I don't get who the readers are, and we don't market to them, and they don't find my book? And is it only people with Lyme disease, or a child who has a chronic illness? Or what about resistance? There were so many strong themes in my book that I guess I'm sort of putting this question out to all of you, because in the end, you have to focus it somehow and get people interested in reading it. And it can't be 20 themes.
So I'm just wondering, because I'm working on memoir now too. I've been working on forever, but as I'm writing, I'm trying to write to a certain person, or I pick my audience to write to, which is different than who I'm going to sell it to. I wonder if you did the same thing while you were writing. Were you writing to, did you have a person in mind you were writing to, or anybody?
Good question. I can't answer that one because it's my mom's words. I can't.
Yeah. Well, I think I'm trying to write it for a friend of mine that I wanted to tell the story to, and that really helps me. But that's not, this is going to be a lot more people that hopefully will read it besides that person. But
well, you're in process of writing, and that's not yet in publishing process.
Right.
You know?
Yeah, and because I had a mystery, it was pretty easy to go, well, mystery writers who like cozy small town mysteries with strong female quirky characters, which is really different than a memoir.
Mm-hmm.
It's interesting listening to you speak about that, because since you are the authors yourselves, I mean, it's coming from a whole different place than where I'm coming from with my mom's words. Mm-hmm. And the thing is, for me, in thinking about who the audience would be, if it's not clearly not me writing it, but thinking about who are the audience members who would be potential readers. And I had to think across a large spectrum. Some people were saying to me, oh, it would probably be just, the older people who understand war or have been affiliated with war in some way. And I think, no, it's also a love story. It's a story about, parents and children, families raising children. It could also be used as a personalized text for teaching students in high school or college about history in a more personalized way. So you can get the teenagers all the way to the 80-plus-year-olds as your potential readers. So for me, marketing in that sense was, didn't take me out of any personal place for me, but from a perception of my mother's daughter, okay, who would like to read this? Who do I think can be a reader for this book?
I found that one way you can learn more about who's reading your book is experimenting with Facebook ads. And that's, Melissa taught me how to do Facebook ads. And I've found that has been the real driver of my online sales, that plus a couple of BookBub deals that were good. But, you know, you can change the audience of your ad, and then you can look how one ad to one audience fared versus another, and it gets you a better idea of who you can who it is. But of course, that's after you've already written it. But when you're kind of developing your marketing plans, one of the things I found the hardest to do in this pre-pub time was when they said, "Well, what are the comparable books?" It's like, well,
Yeah.
and no other book like mine, or gosh, there are these books that I really like, and how can I compare my book to these books by these great authors? So I don't know what your experiences have been in trying to find comps. How do you do that?
So when I was querying when I was querying Miracles and Menorahs, which is my first book, I was asked for comps. The thing is, generally speaking, there were no at the time books like Miracles. There was no Hanukkah romance single title the way that I'd written it. So what I did was I thought about the book that I'd written, the kind of story that I was trying to tell, the tone that I was trying to match. And I thought about books that had been published comparatively recently that tried to reach for that tone. A lot of them were Christmas books, but they gave the message, they sort of hit the level of the story, the tone, the kind of characters. Some of them would catch the same audience that I was looking for. And when I was asked to talk about why, when my agent eventually signed and when Thule eventually signed me, I was able to say, this is why, this is where you put this book. This is what this cover has to look like to be in conversation with these other stories. This is the colors that need to be on this cover, and then this is where the audience comes from. And it's all because I was able to think about, even though there were no direct comps to the book, I was able to figure out what they were. I was able to find them because, it's sort of the more sort of esoteric reasons, like, again, tone, audience, character. Who do you write like? Who do you think of yourself like? Who inspires you? And I think that's where you find your comps. And I think that's also where you find your audience. Who do you want your, we were talking about, Susan, earlier about who do you write to? Who do you want to read your book when you're writing it? And I think that once you figure out the answers to those questions, comps are a much easier thing to find.
And you can also go beyond that to asking for blurbs from some of those people that you've thought of.
Exactly.
One of the things that somebody told me early on, well, my book is for kids, so that's a whole other market for 8 to 12-year-olds. And I obviously don't, or I did not before, read for 8 to 12-year-olds. And so somebody told me, you need to be reading those books. And I started reading them, and they're wonderful. And it's the same kind of thing. I can immediately tell this author's tone and the themes that they're expressing and the types of characters and everything matches. Yeah, exactly what you were saying, Stacey. And I think I've read somewhere 20 to 30 books for 8 to 12-year-olds, and I love it. And it's just helped me so much see the audience that I'm aiming for and get a good sense of voice. It's inspiring me to write for the future. So I would just say anybody who doesn't know comps, read within your genre, and you'll eventually find something. Yeah.
So our last question is, what are some surprising positives that you didn't expect in this whole process and the impact it's had on your life?
Getting to know other women authors. That's the overriding thing for me, is feeling like I'm alone in this journey and then realizing I'm not, and helping each other solve problems, or cooperating on some marketing, or writing blurbs for each other. And it's yeah, it's been really nice.
Yeah, I think I said in the beginning too, just learning a lot more about the whole indie world and the whole other side of publishing. I mean, I came out of the MFA programs and, you know, it was all like, you've got to publish it now under the big four. So it's getting smaller and smaller and finding out that there's a whole nother world of books and readers out there that I had really no idea about. And I've learned that it's adventurous and fun and filled with women that have stories that otherwise we would never hear. And I feel like this indie world is putting out, especially in the memoir, almost an archive for lives lived in this last century. And that, to me, being part of that was really exciting.
That is so powerful, an archive for lives lived. That's beautiful.
I feel like I'm actually just on the cusp of your experiences because I feel that I have that to look forward to. It's just ahead of me. But what has worked for me just prior to that has been the silver lining of the pandemic, oddly enough, having that concentrated time to really focus on bringing the manuscript to a place where I could actually submit it to a publisher. That never would have happened if I didn't have a sheltering in, that lockdown. That just wouldn't have happened. You know, between work and running about as we all do, it just wasn't possible. So I feel that was kind of a very fabulous gift of the time element. And also in the process, discovering how much I really enjoyed editing, particularly editing my mother's words, because in the process, I felt like it was a real visit with her, that we were exchanging conversations and warmth and giggles and things like that. So I always really look forward to jumping in again. So I'm going to be meeting with Mom. We're having a conversation again. And in the process, I also got to discover my parents better because there's some of my father's diary entries in there. And so to have both is just like, it's a real gift to have the gift of my parents and really being able to get more focused into their deeper lives. Because when we're all so busy all the time, it's very easy to gloss over it and not really be able to get into all of that. So this has been a gift. And also, I know I was saying earlier in this whole thing about the author identities. Like, well, I'm not an author, but I feel like in the process, I've been expanding my identity and my definition of self. So I feel that there are more possibilities, and the fabulous thing is that the learning keeps happening. I know there are more phases to this whole process. It's like people said, so when you're done, when you're done editing, then what are you going to do with your time? I'm going, oh, I have no idea. You have no idea. Then it comes into really getting the book out there. It doesn't sell itself. And so I feel that I'll be continuing to learn and that new avenues will be opening as a result of how I put myself out there and connect with others and do the networking. And just as you all have said, really believe in yourself, believe in what you've done, your product, and just go forth, go forth.
Well, like Margaret, my book, I mean, you're much closer to publication than I am actually, but I as well have a lot of learning to do, as soon as the book comes out there. But just learning for me, I mean, I came to this as an artist. I started the illustrations first, and then I wrote a very short story and thought I was done. I mean, I wrote it in a week and was like, this is ready to go out in the world. And that was over 2 years ago. So just learning what it means to be a writer, and that it's just another craft, and having a critique group that was so supportive. Like, I forget who mentioned just the writing community has been a blessing, and and everybody has their own little unique, I call my writing group, little group of weirdos. So it's been really nice to have other people who are just very creative and funky and weird in their own way, and learn from them. So that's what I've enjoyed and what I'm looking forward to going forward.
I want to share that what surprised me in this last almost year, because my book's coming up on its first birthday, and after all the buzz and the launching and the podcasting, and I kind of came to a place where I took a little pause on some things and kept up with my Instagram. And then I started hearing from readers. And one time I went over to Barnes and Noble, which I had not done, and I started reading my reviews. And I mean, it was the sweetest experience for me. Wow. People just sharing what happened to them when they read the story. And so that was, that was nice. And it's nice to be in a place where I'm not in that humongous learning curve of what to do before it publishes and then right after. And now I feel like I get to enjoy it more, maybe in some ways.
So as I go from having had published book 1 to book 2 at the end of this month, I'm kind of at an interesting crossroads. I had to figure out what worked for book 1 and apply it to book 2, or throw out what didn't work, including my writing process and how I did that. Let me tell you, writing to deadline was interesting and fascinating. And learning that I could do that was a fantastic, wonderful shock. But it happened in the middle of the pandemic with a bunch of amazing writers groups. There was 30-day drafters, my romance rogues, my critique partners, there's this amazing romance schmooze group, which I love. And all of them helped make space for my writing. Tons of different sprints during the day. And then the plan for the writing itself of book 2 completely changed. That went out the window. I had intended to be on site for things, but clearly that wasn't the case. So I used my memories. I used, Google the Street Views, various online sites that sort of pivoted towards allowing you to see things that you could not get to in person. The editing process, and then sort of changing my online presentation for book 2. Book 1 was a party because of course it was a Hanukkah book, but what's book 2? So it's kind of this exploration of themes, and I'm reaching out to authors. I'm learning more Instagram lives, which I didn't do book 1. I had a cover reveal for book 2. Sort of, again, trying things that worked, trying things that didn't. But one of the things that I will say, talking about reading reviews, one of my favorite things to come out of book 1, the sort of results of that, I had a very particularly interesting coffee drink recipe that sort of appeared throughout book 1. One of the reviewers actually made a process of going to actually get this coffee drink. And it was this moment of joy because she read my book, she enjoyed it, and she enjoyed it enough to go and get the coffee drink. I was like, that's amazing. I was like, okay, I have arrived as an author because someone took this thing out of my book that I desperately wanted to make real and made it real. So
that's awesome.
Thank you to all our panelists, and for our viewers, remember to subscribe and also check out the panelists' YouTube channels linked in the description below. After Kilimanjaro, Dancing in the Narrows, A Dream to Die For, Journey Between Two Worlds, The Other Forest, History of Us are available on Amazon, links below, as well as links to each panelist's website. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Hey, woo.
Yay, nice.
Bye-bye.
I like that cover.